Hello, folks. Greetings. Welcome back to the class. Um, I know that I kind of took a break, longer break than necessary because I was busy at work. Um, so today, what I'm going to do is my original plan was I need to teach you about things like methods or subs and functions in VBA, right? Because that is the fundamentals of programming, really. Okay. But before I can dwell into that, I thought that I need to kind of give you an idea of how this programming, that is, whatever you program, how does it finally work internally in a computer, right? I need to say that, or I need to teach you that to better appreciate what you're actually trying to do in Excel VBA. But then what I thought is that, well, I already taught some classes before on that, and I have a very elaborate video that runs to, it's a three-part video. It runs around an hour. So, and the video is right here. This is one of my channels, and it clearly explains. I mean, these introduction to computer programming, module 1, module 2, and module 3 very clearly explains how things happen internally to a little bit higher level. I know that some people, when we talk about the internals of computer, there's some amount of math and things like that you got to do. But I have explained these very, very clearly. So what I will do is, in this video, if you see the details, I'll put the links to these three modules. Okay. Don't run this video. Please pause this video. Go and see those three modules. Get an idea of how programming works before you come back here. Because then what I'm showing you, you will learn, you will understand it better. Okay? Because if you remember that from the beginning, I've been telling that there are three goals for whatever videos I'm creating. One, I want to teach you programming. Two, I want to deal with personal finances. And the reason why I want to teach you this personal finance is that, see, programming without any domain is really boring because you don't understand why you need to program things, why you need to write a program, right? So that's why we went into the loan calculation, and it was a pretty good application that we built, right? Now, of course, we got to add a lot of bells and whistles, and over time we'll add more bells and whistles. But that's one. And then the final goal is that along the way, you're also learning some advanced features of Excel. Okay. So we have these three goals. And one of the important goal for me is it's quite easy to learn real programming using Excel. Because it's, see, when you think about, okay, I want to do programming, right? Let's say that you want to learn programming in one language. The problem is that you need to visually see how your program works. And the option we have right now is that if it is easy, if there is an easy entry point where I can do programming, then all I have is the black console where you can actually type some programs, run it, and see the result. That's one way to learn. The other way is really get into things like web programming or JavaScript or whatever and actually see how your program works visually. But both of those is not a very ideal way to see your programs, especially if you want to do something really complex. But with Excel, because Excel is already providing you an environment where you can see things visually, it's a great way to learn programming. Okay? That's why I think it's important that you learn. If when you're investing your time on these videos, it's better to learn how programming works. Okay, and it's very simple. As I told you, that it's not hard at all, and you have all these YouTube videos. And once you put some comments, I can also help you out. So it's not a big deal at all to learn how to program. Okay, and it's a very useful skill. I'll tell you that a lot of people who is not related to computer science, the field, are all programming, right? So therefore, it's better to learn a little bit of program skill that will always be useful for you. Okay. Okay. So that said, that I'm going to assume when I start this class, I am going to assume that you already learned a little bit of, or you went through these videos. Okay. So I'm not going to repeat all the things that's said in this video, but we are going to jump into something that is important. Now let's, for that, I'm just going to draw a little bit and give you some understanding of your program. So if you take a program, so this is, let's say that your program, okay. What is this program? You're entering in instructions to really indirectly to the computer, right? Now I know that in Excel VBA you are putting in a lot of instructions, and you can see the input and output in Excel itself. But basically you're instructing the computer to automatically do things which you'll have to manually do, right? That's what you're basically doing. And for this instructions, what do you need? You need what is called as input. Okay, what do I mean by input? Now, if we look at our Excel sheet here, we already said that, hey, there is these yellow things, right? The things which are in yellow are your input. Given these yellow things, you can, when you click on this calculate loan schedule, you can get something out of it, right? Basically, what are you getting out of it? You're calculating the monthly payment, which is blue. Then you're making a go or a no-go decision, which is in this purple color, purple or violet. And then you're also seeing the whole schedule of your payment down here in this big table, right? So given these yellow things, you did so many other things, right? So therefore, if we go back to our picture, so given a bunch of input which went into your program did various things and it gave out a bunch of output. Okay, this is what your program did. Okay, so you took some input, did some calculations, and then you're creating more output. Okay, this is basically a program, right? Now, the amazing thing about the program is that your input can keep varying. Like right now it's 10% interest. I can change that to 3% interest, and I can click on calculate loan. The input changed, and so you're again and again running the same program only once, but you can change the input as you want, right? You can change the combination of this input to get a different output, but the program can be run multiple times again and again. And end of the day, when I close the computer, I save this worksheet in my hard disk. So tomorrow I can load it again and run this program and again and again. So the same set of instructions can be run again and again. That's the advantage of this program. And that's why your input is different, and based on the input, your output is different. Makes sense, right? This is a normal thing that we do. Now, in our case, how do we what did we do to get the input? We use the range function. We said that a range of E2 means that I got that out input, right? Then I used the range of E4, that is another input. Range of E6, another input. Same thing, output also we use the range command, but instead of getting the value, you're actually setting the value, right? So you were using E8 to set the payment that you calculated, you are using the I4 cell to set the number of months, the interest per month, and then a go, no go decision. And then you take a whole range of cells to show the payment schedule, right? So these are things you did, and it's common sense, but I want to show you that before we get into something else. And that something else is the idea of modules, okay? Okay, let me explain what a module is. Now let's take a car, okay? Now, when you drive the car, obviously you have a gas pedal, you have a brake, you have a parking brake, you have the steering wheel, you have a dashboard, you have all kinds of little things, okay? And each of those little things has a specific function, right? They perform a specific thing for the car. Now, if you pop the hood of the car and see inside, you can see like engine, the radiator, the alternator, the transmission. See, there are different parts. Okay, all of these parts together is what makes the car, but they are made of parts. Got it? Okay, and when you have these parts, these parts hold certain things and do certain things. What do I mean by that? Like if you take the gas tank, for example, it holds gasoline, the fuel. And also there is some kind of fuel injection system where the fuel gets injected into the 4-stroke or 6-stroke or V8 or V4 engines, right? 4-stroke engines, but I'm saying that there are 8 cylinders or 4 cylinders, right? Now they all do certain things, they all take some action to perform certain things, but also they also have some state. For example, if you take a 4-stroke engine, in each stroke certain things happen. In one stroke the fuel comes in one stroke there is combustion, in one stroke there is the exhaust function going on. So all of these things are going on within that 4-stroke engine. So there are some actions that is being performed, and there is also a state. For example, when the combustion happens, we know that there is a state where whenever the combustion happens, the cylinder expands. So your piston is pushed out, right? And as soon as the combustion is over, the wasteful gases need to be exhausted, and by the time the piston gets pushed in. See, there is some action as well as some state, right? So those are basically your modules, right? So if you take a program, my point is the program is divided into many modules, correct? Okay, you can divide it into many modules. Okay, I'll probably put the module on the top, or bring it on the top, bring it forward. Okay, so your program basically it contains multiple modules. What are modules? Modules are small pieces of instructions, small pieces of code. These modules themselves are pieces of code, but these modules can contain what we call as a sub. This is VBA terminology, okay, or a function. A sub or a function. Okay, both these are inside your modules, okay, along with, of course, variables, right? Okay, so your modules contains variables, may contain variables, it may contain a sub, and it may contain a function. Now, interesting thing in VBA is that, let's start with a function that's easy to understand. Okay, if you take a function is a piece of code. Okay, it's a piece of code where it actually has its own little input and it actually has its own little output. Now, this input and output can feed into some other function where again there's its own input and its own output. Now, that's a function. Now, the sub, on the other hand, it has input, but it doesn't do much. It probably internally can go and change the state of Excel itself, go change the cell, do things like that, but it doesn't return any value back for some other sub or function. You understand? So that's what a function and a sub is about. And they are part of these modules. And in each module, there is a bunch of functions and a bunch of subs and a bunch of variables. And a module, let's say that this is module A. Module A can talk to module B by invoking module B's function. Module C can talk to module A to invoke some other functions. So this is basically what I mean is that your big program is organized into smaller units of software code. You got it? Even if you didn't get it, it's okay. Just keep this in mind. Then when I show it in Excel VBA, then you'll get it. Okay. So let me close things here and let's go to Visual Basic. Okay. Now, if you see, first you have a VBA project. I'm talking about, if you look at the left hand side, you have a little window where it says VBA project. Inside the VBA project, there is a sheet and a workbook. Now, a sheet and workbook is called as objects in Excel. Okay. So this is sheet 1, which is because if you see your Excel document, you have only sheet 1. Now, by chance, if you create another sheet, now if you go back to VBA or Visual Basic, you'll see there is a sheet 2. So for every sheet, that Excel object is displayed here, and of course there's only one workbook. Okay. The sheets themselves can have code. For example, our sheet 1 had a button, and the button had a sub called calc button click. So this sub is invoked when I click that button. Okay. Now, if you see calc button click, there is a line here. It's called calculate loan schedule. Now, that is a function. It's actually a sub. Okay, it's not a function. It's actually a sub. Why? It doesn't return anything. It just says, hey, go do that. If you say go do that, that's a sub. If you say go do that and get me back something, that's a function. Got it? Okay. Now, where is this calculate loan schedule? Now, if you see modules, under modules, there is a module 1. Okay. Now, if I click on module 1, right, it really shows me that there is a sub. And basically, sub stands for subroutine. Okay, routine, subroutine. Got it? So, a subroutine is a piece of code. So, there is a piece of code called calculate loan schedule. Now, what is happening in sheet 1 is when the button gets clicked, this sub is called. This sub calls calculate loan schedule sub, which is in module 1. Okay? Good so far, right? Now, the one thing that we know is that I'm going back to Excel. Let me go back to Excel. And I'm going to delete this sheet because I don't need it. So if you come here and the moment I click on, so I change some values here, 5 years, okay, click on calculate loan schedule, it actually executes the program. How does it execute? When you click on calculate loan schedule, you are actually getting into this sheet 1 button, and you're running this sub. That sub calls another sub called calculate loan schedule, and I am coming to calculate loan schedule. Got it? Okay. Now the other thing you will notice is I actually modified from the last time. I modified this program, and you will notice two things. I would like you to look at this line where I removed a lot of lines here which was calculating. So remember that if we, in the previous program, we actually calculate the number of months, interest per month, and then we invoke the formula for payment. But instead of doing all of that stuff, what I did is I'm using the range functions to get the principal, loan amount basically, the interest and years, those three values. This I get it from Excel. After I get it, I actually invoke a function where the principal, the interest, and the years are input. Got it? Now, where is this calculate payment function? It's right below. I actually wrote it right below. So you have a calculate payment. And here you see this is a function. It's a function in VBA. You say function calculate underscore payment. And within parentheses, I'm saying there will be three parameters. The first parameter is the principal, which is of type currency. The second parameter is the interest, which is of type double. And the third parameter is years, which is of type integer. So these are three parameters. This is the input for your function. And then you see there is a line called as currency. This is optional, but it tells you that what is returned from this function is a currency object. Now, if you see the function, what you're doing is that you're first calculating the interest for each month by dividing it by 12. You're calculating the number of payments by multiplying years into 12, because there are 12 months in the year. Then you are also setting the values of the R and N in the ranges. Then you are invoking the calculate payment formula, which is principal into rate into 1 plus rate to the power of n, the number of payments, divided by 1 plus rate to the power of n, number of payments, minus 1. This is the formula that we use to calculate payment. And that's what we are doing. But the interesting thing is that is actually assigned to a variable called calculate payment. Now, interestingly, the function name is calculate payment, and we are assigning a value to calculate payment. That's how easy it is in VBA for a function to return a value. It just treats the name of the function as a variable and assigns whatever it needs to return to that variable. Okay? So when you do this, what really happens is that all of this is calculated and that value is returned to the caller, which means that calculate payment, that function is returning the payment value. That's what is happening. Now, what's the great idea about this is that I can calculate, within my function, I'm calling another function. Within my sub, I'm calling another sub to do something. And I can call this calculate payment many times. So I can reuse it. That's why I'm organized this way. Now, if you go down to the code, again, after I got the payment, I'm actually setting the payment value. Then I have another call called make underscore decision, where I'm passing the parameter as payment. Now, this is, if you see, again, I am creating another sub. This time it's not a function, because the sub doesn't return anything. But what it did here is that it says it takes the payment, compares that with the budgeted value, and prints a no-go or go in Excel itself. So here it's not returning anything, but it's doing some work. Again, you can call this multiple times with different parameters to get different results. You are reusing, okay? That's the main point of functions and sub, okay? And that's what we have done with functions and sub. Understand? Now, I can go to the extreme of creating more and more functions, but before I do that, there are a few things that I want to show. That this one says private. That means this sub cannot be invoked by anybody else. It cannot be invoked by module 2, for example. Okay? Whereas, when you don't mention anything, this function can be invoked by anybody within the program. So let's say that I go ahead and make this private. I am resetting my code, then going back to Excel and say, hey, go ahead and calculate payment. Guess what? It says, uh-oh, that sub or function is not defined. What do you mean? It means that in the module 1, you said that this sub is private. That means only within the module anybody can call calculate loan schedule. Not sheet 1 has no ability to call module 1. So therefore, I should not make it private, because if it is made private, you cannot call it. Excel cannot recognize where is calculate loan schedule. Okay? But at the same time that, I made the sub as private, I can even make the function as private. The reason why these are by nature private is that they are only invoked by this module. No other module from outside is invoking it, and therefore it's better to be private. Now, why do I need to make it public or private? It's because when you're coding and your code is so complex, sometimes accidentally you may call a module's function, and that may create a bug. So when you declare that, hey, this is public, this is for public, that this is for people outside the module to communicate with me, and these are private because these are internal to my module. If you do that, then what you get better organized code, and when the code is better organized, then you can really code better. Okay. So to recap, today's is a very short session. You need to go and read or view that 1 hour session on programming, introduction to programming, module 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to put the link under this video. Then all you need to understand is every big program has input and you're doing some calculation and there's output. But within a program, you can have additional modules, and within modules, you can have data and functions or subroutines. Again, a subroutine is something where you can pass on parameters, but the subroutine does not return anything, so therefore it does some work for you. Whereas a function, on the other hand, it does some work and then returns a value. Okay. So those are the 2 ways in which you can. So this is the way you organize. You create more modules, you create more functions, and keep them organized in a way what is private and what is public. If you do that, you can write very, very large programs in Excel. So thank you very much for your time. Today, that is all. From tomorrow, what you are going to do is that we are going to get into some of the core computer science concepts. We are going to develop algorithms. We are going to understand what an algorithm is, and more make more efficient programs. Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and see you in the next class.